So today's build is going to focus on Solar Hunter, and it's going to be on an exotic that is not very popular, that I have not really seen any content creators make a video or a build on. But one thing that I like to do on this channel is take an exotic, experiment with it, and try to see if we can make it viable for endgame content. And this is exactly what I did here with the Ophidia Spaith exotic chest armor piece for Hunter. I put it on for Solar because it has to be on a Solar subclass, and then I started experimenting with it a little. And as I was experimenting with building the build, I looked in dim and seen there was a hidden perk, a unique special interaction. So the exotic itself grants 2 knife charges for the Solar subclass. Now, both can be recharged on a gambler's dodge, and with the knock 'em down aspect, you can easily refund your melee by just getting a powered melee kill when you are radiant. So we can just instantly do that. Now, you don't have to have Ophidia Spaith on to do that, but the other thing that you'll find is that when you are using Knife Trick as your melee of choice, that you'll be refunded both charges on an ignition kill in which the powered melee from your knife applied scorch to the target. If we, for instance, hit a target and we don't kill them, and then the second one hits them and it scorches and the ignition kills them, we instantly get back both of those knives. So Ophidia Spaith, this is an interesting thing. Now, many other people would say, hey, you could just put on Star Eater Scales, you could just put on Athers's Embrace, you could put on Caliban's Hand if you want to do some knife stuff. You could use Young Kara's Spine. I actually probably would want to stay away from that because the incoming nerfs to that are actually going to make you not want to be on Young Kara's Spine. But there's a couple other exotics, like Assassin's Cowl would be great because you could throw the knife and then you're going to get invisibility and you're going to get healed from that as well. So that would give you a lot of survivability, but I don't want to rely on Assassin's Cowl because I want to make a separate build for that. I want to see what Ophidia Spaith can do. So that's the goal of this build. Now that we've gone over the exotic, let's take a look at the rest of the subclass and see what it has to offer for this exotic. Now, when it comes to the Solar subclass, you can have your choice of jump, whatever your preference is there. Now, as for the dodge, we need to use Gambler's Dodge, as it's going to refund our melee ability in case we miss and are unable to hit our target with our knives. Upon activating that Gambler's Dodge, it will proc our aspect on your mark, which will instantly grant us its maximum ×3 benefit, which provides us and nearby allies increased weapon handling and reload speed for 12 seconds. As for our knife of choice, use Knife Trick, as it throws a fan of 3 knives, and each knife applies 20 stacks of Scorch for a total of 60 Scorch if all 3 knives hit the same target. With the second melee thrown, if at least 2 knives hit on the second melee, we'll hit 100 stacks of Scorch and our target will ignite. This means that our melee charges, both of them, will be instantly refunded when that ignition occurs. Also, anytime we're throwing these knives onto a target, it's making us radiant through the use of the Ember of Torches fragment. Ember of Torches states that powered melee attacks against combatants make you and nearby allies radiant. Radiant is a 25% weapon damage bonus, and with the second aspect, Knock 'em Down, when we're radiant and kill any enemy with a powered melee, that powered melee charge is instantly refunded. It's also going to give us increased duration to our Marksman Golden Gun, which is my preferred super of choice for this subclass setup. As for the grenade, we'll be using the Healing Grenade, and we'll be combining that with our previously mentioned Ember of Torches with Ember of Empyrean. Ember of Empyrean states that our solar weapon or melee final blows will allow us to keep Radiant and Restoration applied as long as we kill with a melee or solar weapon before the timer expires. One way that we can give ourselves some extra room to allow that to happen is through the other fragment, Ember of Solace. Ember of Solace gives us a 50% longer duration for our Radiant and Restoration buffs that are applied to us. Now, the fourth fragment is Ember of Searing. With Ember of Searing, any scorched target that we defeat, which would be through incandescent weapons or our melee abilities, will create a fire sprite, and that fire sprite will give us 12% of our grenade ability, thus allowing us to refund our Healing Grenade and keep it off of cooldown. Then our last fragment in the build is Ember of Singeing. Our class ability recharges faster when scorching targets. This is a 300% additional base class ability regeneration for 3 seconds after scorching a target. All of this combined is how this kit will function, but remember to feel free to do your own testing and see if you can find a combination that you feel works best for your playstyle. Okay, as for artifact, it doesn't really matter so much as to what mods you're taking about the weapons, because what you're going to want to do is just find what works best for you. Keep in mind that when you are Radiant, your weapons will be anti-barrier by nature, so just choose what you feel works best for you in your build for what you're doing for anti-barrier champions, unstoppable champions, or overload champions. Then when we look into things like the second column of the artifact, there isn't really anything that benefits our build here in the second column. In the third column, it's the same thing here as well. Just make sure you're using elemental orbs solar. Now, when we move to the very end of the artifact, we do have overload machine gun. Use elemental fury because anytime you're stunning the champions, your melee attacks are going to deal more damage to champions. Then I'm using semi-auto striker because I'm using a bow. So if you're using some kind of exotic bow like Tiku's, or maybe you're using something else like Polaris Lance, try using semi-auto striker because it's going to help you just get free armor charges anytime you have fewer than 2. Then the most important 2 of the entire build, everything else is kind of like inconsequential, a little bit insignificant. The 2 most important things that you want to make sure that you have are Rapid Fire Ranger and Monochromatic Maestro. And I'm going to have some footage in the background that's going to show this. Anytime that we're using an ability, which we're constantly throwing our knives on an enemy, it's going to buff our weapon damage for 10% for 5 seconds. So that's going to pair nicely with Rapid Fire Ranger because we're not only through Monochromatic Maestro going to have a 10% bonus, it's actually going to be 35 because it pairs and syncs together with Radiant. Then we take our damage up an extra 15% because we're weakening targets with Rapid Fire Ranger. So the armor mods in this build are focused around super cooldown and ability spamming, especially the healing grenade. But because Golden Gun Marksman has a 9-minute and 16-second base cooldown, it's nowhere near as short as Blade Barrage. So I tried to make this build a little bit more functional for getting to that super. So one of the ways that that's going to happen is through Dynamo. We're going to be always using our Gambler's Dodge to either refund some melee charges that we may have need to come back off of cooldown, or it's also just going to be a way to get on your mark to give us extra handling and reload. So Dynamo is going to reduce our super cooldown because we're always using that ability near an enemy. Then we have Hands On. We're going to get bonus super energy on melee kills. We're always spamming melee because we always want to keep our restoration and our radiant going. Another part of the build that focuses on survivability is that healing grenade with Empyrean and torches paired together. So we want to be able to use any armor charges that we have to get our healing grenade back in case of an emergency. So another thing that we do is heavy-handed. Our powered melee final blows create orbs of power. That's going to go hand in hand with Hands On. We're getting extra super energy. We're getting armor charges for our grenade kickstart there together. We're going to take Charged Up. We're going to take 2 resistance mods of our choice, depending on what we're doing, the incoming threat. 1 copy of Stacks on Stacks. Recuperation, even though we do have Radiant, sometimes we may need just an orb because we've stopped our loop. And then we have Innervation. This is going to reduce the grenade cooldown every time we get one of these orbs that we're making with heavy-handed. Then down here on the class item, what we're going to be running is Distribution because it's going to reduce all ability cooldowns when we use our class ability near a target. We're already going to be using Dynamo, so we already know that this is going to pair together. That's also going to reduce the super and every other ability that we have, as in the melee and the grenade. Outreach and Bomber to finish everything off here because we really don't need any other way to make orbs because we can do that with heavy-handed. First and foremost, I want to give a big shout out to Profanities for doing my transmog for all of my build videos. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. I'm a little bit skeptical to recommend this exotic and say everybody should use this. It's the best exotic in the game, but I think it has a fun loop and a cool play style that you can really embrace and become the king of the throwing knife. If you look for the challenge, if you look for an opportunity to say, is this exotic bad? I don't necessarily think the exotic's bad, and I don't necessarily think the exotic is great. I think it's mid. I think it's right in the middle of the pack. It just needs some other functionality to it, something that makes throwing those knives even better. Maybe it has some more intrinsic ignitions happening to it. Maybe it can chain ignitions because of that hidden special interaction. A chain ignition from the knife trick ignition would be a really cool benefit, a really cool feature to this exotic right there. It's just a good enough thing to add on to it that would make it an enjoyable exotic to use in master level content and legend to master level content. That's my closing thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.